Hello and welcome, and thank you for joining me. Today, I wanted to share my learnings and summary from TrailheadDX Conference 2025. I know you probably have already heard a lot about it since the conference was 3-4 weeks ago, and I finally had the time to summarize my thoughts and record this video. And as a follow up, I will be making more videos about the things that I learned and show you more hands on. In today's video, we're just going to look at a summary level, and I'm just going to try to present the things as they were presented to me. So this was my first time actually attending this conference, and I'm told from other people that this year the conference was very different than normal. Normally there used to be a lot of content around flows, Apex, Lightning Web Components, and lots of learning for people who were beginners could go in the conference and learn a lot. However, this year it was a lot focused on Agentforce, even if the session could be about LWC or MuleSoft or some other technology, there were definitely sprinkles of Agentforce all around. But let's get into the topics of things that I thought were really exciting to call out. So first thing we're gonna look at are some keynote announcements. The first one is now you can invoke Agentforce without using a chat interface. So you can call agents from flows, from some external APIs, from Apex. So that's pretty exciting. Next thing, big thing was now you can sign up for Developer Edition org that comes with Agentforce and DataCloud. If you haven't already, I highly recommend you do that because this is going to work like any other Developer Edition org. And unlike the partner org that I have that would always expire in 30 days, or even the Trailhead orgs expire in like a week, this is really a good place to start building and not worrying about losing those agents that you might have built. And Scratch orgs as well will now support Agentforce and Prompt Builder. There was a big exciting announcement about Agentforce Testing Center. I'm going to talk more about this in a little bit. And there is Agent Exchange, which is similar to App Exchange, but more for AI agents that other partners will build and can share. So definitely more knowledge sharing there, and you can reuse potentially things that others have built. And just more Agent Blazor community. You can ask questions about agents and things like that. There's also Interaction Explorer, which will provide you more analytics about the agent interactions, performance metrics, things that I was hoping to see already, but it's exciting that it's coming up, and Salesforce is adding more around the Interaction Explorer, the testing. So I'm really excited to see all these new things coming into play that will make it for a more holistic tool, which I thought was missing until now. And Agent Builder was really interesting. I haven't played around with this, but you can basically have agents build themselves. So give them instructions, and then they can come up with the instructions and all the other things and actions for agents. So basically agent building themselves, which is pretty exciting. Einstein bots to service agents. So if you have used Einstein bots, right, they are also somewhat AI generated bot, but they are different from Agentforce service agent. And definitely the future is going towards Agentforce service agents. So there's a tool that can help you move your Einstein bots to Agentforce service agent. Obviously, there's a lot to consider, including cost, use cases, the product maturity before you start to make that switch. But it's good to see that that is coming because there were a lot of clients on Einstein bot. You probably are using Einstein bot and you're thinking, okay, how do I move this to Agentforce service agents? So that's going to be possible. It's in beta. And there were more features announced around RAG and ability to retrieve precise answers. That more applies to grounding your data when you're creating agent using DataCloud. So there's more and more functionality added to that. Next one, and this is where I want to shout out everyone to start getting into Trailhead and knocking out these modules. I'm going to do that myself as well. So Salesforce announced this Agent Blazor status, which is really good if you want to start learning. So there are 3 buckets: champion, innovator, and legend. And you can go through these trails. I thought the champion was really good if you want to understand foundational knowledge about AI, natural language processing, how this all works in the background. They have really good examples. They're very short, bite-sized, so highly recommend starting reading that and knowing more about LLMs and what all this means. Go through that, and I think this is just a good thing to have on your resume or on your Trailhead profile, so you can call yourself a legend on Agent Blazor. All right, let's talk about building agentic workflows. This is one of the first sessions I attended at the conference, and this was really good. I highly recommend watching the sessions by Mohit Srivastava. He talks about how you can build agentic workflows, the best practices, and the flow of it all. And there's a really good example to share. And if you can build it yourself, even better. And so agentic workflows are nothing but a new way of building workflows, which is different from the logical workflows which we are used to building. Normally, when we are given a business requirement, we start with, okay, what is the criteria? When should this fire? And then we go and build the thing. Agentic workflows allows you to have flexibility around if there's a business rule changes, you don't have to continue to go to the flows to update the entry criteria and so on. You can let the agent, the AI, or the Gen AI side take care of that portion. So the planner thinks for you and does fire the action that you needed to fire as long as you provide the right instructions. But the actual thinking behind the action is taken by the agent, and you still have your flows to do the actual thing if you need to do a record update or if you need to do a data dip into some APIs. All of that thing still needs to happen, but it just provides you an additional brain to know when to fire certain things using instructions. So here's the process, and agentic workflows, the way he defines is AI powered processes where intelligent agents will plan, evaluate, and refine their plans to execute actions. So you still need actions. We're not moving away from creating flows or Apex. We still need all of those things behind the scenes. Triggering those things and when to trigger those things is what the intelligent agents will plan for us. So you start by defining topic, like what is your agent role? What is it supposed to do? Give it some instructions, associate some actions. You have to create the actions, right? Whether it's a flow or a prompt template or Apex, you have to create those actions, then attach it to the topic, instruct it. You have to be very clear with your instructions. Make sure they're not ambiguous with each other, and then keep testing, update the instructions as you need. And that's basically the entire flow. There are some examples that he also shows where, let's say the website is for partner and all potential partners can come in there and request to be your vendor. And as a part of the process, you are asking to do some background checks for the vendor, and if necessary, create some task for the account owner to go reach out. Some of those elements can be done within the non-deterministic way, which is talking to the person and responding with like human-like language. But then other things where you need to create a task or update a record, those things are done through actions and flows, which is the deterministic side of it. Next slide. And if you're not already familiar, there are key components of the agent. As I said, there's topic, where you describe what the agent does, you give it a scope, what scope it should be working within and what it should not be doing, and instructions. So you can have multiple instructions for a topic. You can say things like, for this particular scenario, when the customer asks for billing information, use the action of get record from the knowledge article or something like that. And if the customer wants to update their account information, ask for more information about their name, address, whatever validation you want to do, then call this other action and give it the action name. So you can be very specific with instructions. That is where you're going to do a lot of your prompt engineering. You're going to write the instructions very clearly, and then it calls the actions based on what you provided. And of course, you need the data, right, for grounding purposes and also just to make your agent smart. There are guardrails in place, which you also can define in the topic of like what it should not be doing, and channels, like you can deploy the same agent into multiple channels. And there are best practices for agentic workflows. You have to start simple with limited use cases. Don't try to over-engineer it. You need to start with basic use cases so you can prove the value. Provide quality data and ensure that the agent is always using the most accurate data. This is very important. For example, if you have knowledge articles, make sure that the agent is not using the archived knowledge articles. You have to design clear actions, as I said, make sure there's no confusion between them. Clear description, clear scope. So a lot of writing, like you have to write everything clearly. Make sure it understands it. The same way you'd be talking to a child, make sure it really understands what you're trying to say. Don't assume that it already knows. You're still gonna implement deterministic logic. Deterministic just means the more exact things that you want it to do via flows, and things where you can get more creative and where it needs that human touch is where you do the non-deterministic business logic that you put in a prompt template. You can choose the right LLM, play around with different LLMs that's available by Salesforce, or if you have your own LLM, you can also bring that. With the testing center, we'll talk about that more. Monitor and iterate go over the utterances using the analytics that's available to us. And then, you should always have a backup plan of like, what happens if the agent fails? Customer is interacting with an agent. How do we make sure we handle that nicely so that the person is not frustrated? And then we talk about the optimization and what are the lessons learned by Salesforce. So there are some optimizations that you need to do. Like you have to constantly monitor the latency of like how long is the agent taking to get back with the answer and how you can make that faster. Make sure that you're not adding so many series of actions one back to back. So it's not a serial process, because then it's going to do one thing, go to the next thing, go to the next thing, and that's just going to take longer. So you have to simplify the task. Think about ways you can parallel process some of those things. Maybe one thing happens and the other things can happen in the background and you can still interact with the person. You don't want to have them waiting forever on a loading screen. Reduce hallucinations by grounding your data. So don't just say, send email to the opportunity owner. You have to give it the grounding data. You have to use the merge fields and data to make sure that it's knowing your context. Test, monitor, and handle error. Goes without saying, you have to continue to test it. Note that all the testing consumes your credits. So be very careful. And this is not bulkified, so don't use it in bulk. And anytime you're making the calls to the LLM, that does consume credits. So make sure you are mindful of how the credit is consumed. I can probably do a whole video just on the credit consumption. I'm still learning myself, so I'm not an expert for sure. And then, like anything else, implement a switch for when you're loading data, for example, because your credits will run out. Salesforce also has their own lessons learned. If you haven't experienced, you can go to the Salesforce help site and you can see that they also implemented the Agentforce agent on their site. Keeping your knowledge up to date is a big one, because for some reason the agent accessing the older knowledge articles. Don't give your agent the chance to use archive content, and keep it simple. As you can see, that's a theme here, keeping it simple. And if you need to switch your home org for DataCloud, give it enough time. This process might take long if you are in the process of implementing this. Talk about Agentforce Testing Center. So Salesforce announced Agentforce Testing Center, which means you can create a CSV file that with the utterance, the expected intent, and actions response, and upload it into Testing Center, and then it can run the testing instead of you having to manually test with all these different utterances. This is very exciting. To me, it was a feature that was lacking, because you can't expect everyone to do manual utterance testing. So you can have a CSV file, upload it, and let it test. And this is what it looks like. You can have like utterance, summarize account acme, your expected topic, I wanted to fire this topic, and this is my expected action, expected response. So response is a free-form text that you have to write, and it will be smart enough to understand what you're saying. And then it will come up with like the responses of like passed or failed. You can see here, they're expecting this. This was the actual result, that means it's passed. If we were something else here, then that would be a fail. One thing to note with testing the Gen AI agents, it's different from traditional testing, as in like you might run the same test again and find a different result. Something that was passed might fail, something that was failed might pass. So you have to have your criteria of like what is the good percent. It's not going to be 100%. So 75% is 80%, is 85%. It depends upon your business. So make sure you have that execution criteria ahead of time. And what I also recommend is start with the testing utterance in mind before you even start build, because as you start to write utterance and as you start to write what is the expected topic and actions, that will give you an idea of how to even build. DevOps, we always say that start with your test cases, but it's so true with building agents. Start with your test cases. What is it going to look like? And then reverse engineer from there. That's how we should be doing all the build. And just a summary of getting test cases, selecting evaluation criteria, run the test case. Obviously, you need to perform human validation. And I think it wasn't enabled in production now, but now you can also enable this in production. But note that this will actually update the real production data. So use that caution if you're trying to test this in production. It might update your production data. And it requires credits, as I already mentioned. There are best practices. Like I said, start with test cases. Perform testing. If there are any changes to the action or the instructions, you have to redo the testing, obviously. And make sure the test data has realistic interactions, it's holistic, it's not just one type of question. Include negative test cases as well, right? You don't want to have all positive. Like, ask a random thing that people might ask it and see how the agent behaves with that. There are some considerations right now, and I think this might change over time, so I'm not going to spend too much time there. Next, I spend a lot of time on DataCloud, because if you are trying to learn anything new right now, I think DataCloud is where you should be spending a lot of time, because the Salesforce new tools or new development are going to happen in Agentforce, and DataCloud is just such a necessary element for Agentforce. For some Agentforce scenarios, you might have DataCloud in the background and not interact with it necessarily. But if you want to ingest any external data, you need to have DataCloud to ground the Agentforce. This is just a Salesforce app slide. You can see the AI and data section. This is where we have the agent orchestration, analytics, other AI models, and all the things need data. Right? AI can be done without data, which is why DataCloud is going to play a very important role. In fact, there was a session where they were saying that DataCloud needs to be enabled in every org. I don't know how true that is, but I can imagine that Salesforce is going to push more and more for DataCloud. You might be thinking, okay, what is the use of DataCloud? Like if you're trying to launch a FAQ chat, for example, and all your data that you need is already in Salesforce in knowledge article, it has to be in knowledge article, then maybe you don't need as much DataCloud. But if you have external knowledge base, or if you have a website, you have some other external data that you're trying to train your agent in, then you need to stream that data into DataCloud, prepare and transform the data, tag the data as needed, and DataCloud can create chunking and can classify the data. You might need to tweak it as needed, and then activate it so that your agent can now use the data that's sitting in your DataCloud. And that is why learning DataCloud is important if you are trying to learn Agentforce, especially if you're trying to do more complicated scenarios with Agentforce. So here's a capability map. I know this is a lot. There are some things that I want to highlight as it applies to Agentforce. DataCloud can do a lot of other things, but we're just focused on how does it apply to Agentforce context. We've got unstructured data, so let's say that's your knowledge article, and some other index. You may need to unify your data across multiple platforms. Let's say there's a customer data in your e-commerce site and there's a customer data in Salesforce. Might need to consolidate that into one unified account. Even if you don't have unified profile, no need of that. Let's say you're just trying to implement a simple Service Cloud chatbot. You might be fine without even needing this, but if you wanted to have a holistic view of the customer, then you will need to also do the identity resolution. There's so many resources to learn more about DataCloud. I might make my own videos about DataCloud. If you don't understand everything here, that's okay. Just know that DataCloud provides you a way to tap into all these different external data sources available within your org. And then retriever. This is a new term for me as well. Retriever is how you can retrieve, as the name suggests, data from DataCloud into the agents so that the agents have access to data. DataCloud 1 was cool for me to know about as well. If you have multiple Salesforce orgs and you enable DataCloud in one org and you wanted that other org to have access to this one org DataCloud data, that is possible using DataCloud 1. It's more standard. Previously, it was a pain to have access without doing some custom API calls and queries, but DataCloud 1 makes it seamless. And then the AI agents will use the data within the DataCloud. I'll talk more about that in a second. This is the example solution architecture. The way I like to understand this in the simplest way is you have an FAQ chatbot on a website and you have knowledge articles sitting in your Salesforce, but also externally in SharePoint. You wanted to bring all of that data together and have that FAQ chatbot to be able to answer the customer questions all by itself without needing an agent. In order to do that, you'd have to ingest data, like I said, into DataCloud, do some magic within DataCloud. And then now when you're writing your prompts, you will have access to the data that you created. So this whole portion is needed to make sure your agent is smart, basically, and has access to all your data, not just Salesforce data. And then Agentforce can do all these things. Some of these are not necessarily Agentforce. They are like more of Einstein 1 functionality, but it's all AI. At least that's how it's being marketed. This was from a session that I attended that was about data cloud architecture. So we're going to talk about how you decide what org to use as your home data cloud org. So if you had multiple orgs and you were looking to decide, that's the first step, to decide which one is your home org for data cloud, or are you going to stand up a whole new org just for DataCloud. There are so many reasons why you might want to have a standalone org, or why might you just use your existing org. It really depends on your circumstances. You might have some compliance requirement. It's usually easier to just have DataCloud in your home org, so everything, you can easily access all the data from that org and you don't have to make connections to external org. I was kind of shocked by this statement where it says every org needs DataCloud. Not sure what that means. Is it every org or is it just Agentforce org? I'm not sure. That's a Salesforce question. And like I was talking, you have options to figure out what is your strategy for when it comes to data cloud provisioning and which option makes the most sense for you. If you just have one org and you don't have any requirements around privacy and anything else like that, just keep it simple and have it in the same home org. Otherwise, you can create a separate org just for Data Cloud. Data Cloud 1, as I said, makes it easier to share data across different orgs. So if you have, let's say, created a segmented insight for in one data cloud and you wanted to share and appear as a related list on a different org, you can do that using Data Cloud 1. There were just some general announcements around Data Cloud product portfolio and what is coming, what's beta and GA. There is something called access policies that allows you to have better access in how you want the people to have access to different rows of data. Data space is more macro level. So let's say if you have a legal team who only needs access to contracts and accounts, that's all. So that's all they get in this limited view of data space. But there might be more granular need of like within that space, how do we control access at an object, field, and row level? Policy-based governance is supposed to help with that. The main challenge with AI agents, Agentforce agents, is going to be that you want to make sure they're not hallucinating. And the best way to do that is making sure the data is grounded. There are different mechanisms, right? We have CRM merge fields. I made videos on that, on how you can add fields from within Salesforce in the prompt template. You can ground with flows. You can bring more complicated logic, bring it into your prompt template. Retrievers and RAG is something I have not talked about before. I will be making videos on that as I learn more. But this is where you can pull data from vector stores, the Data Cloud or the Einstein data library, and have access to that data. You can also call APIs externally. If you have some already pre-built APIs that you would much rather just use that, you can do that as well. And data graphs, you can tap into real-time engagement data from Data Cloud. All of these ways, different ways to ground your data as you are trying to make your agents smart. Now let's talk about architecting scalable unstructured data strategies. That's a mouthful, but you might be familiar with structured and unstructured data. Structured data is more table form and everything is structured. Even if it is JSON, things are structured and you know what the title is and what the row is. Unstructured is more like documents and paragraphs. Even within structured data, there might be unstructured data like long text fields and stuff like that. And I'm still learning a lot of these new terminologies about chunking and tagging. Basically, data can be chunked and tagged correctly so that when you're retrieving the data from your agents, getting the data through your retrievers, they're able to find the right data. I will be making more videos to show you how exactly this looks. But for now, just know that there are costs associated with different types of search you do. You have to pick the right amount, right kind of search. Let's go to the next slide actually. So here we have data sources and you bring all the data into Data Cloud. That will chunk the data and generate some vector embeddings. You can change certain things, but certain things are not changeable, and this all happens in the background. And so there is a vector search index and keyword search index. Use your prompts to then say what kind of search you want to use. If it's as simple as, hey, what is the account number for this person? That is a very straightforward keyword search, right? You just get the account name, go query the data and find out the account number. That's a keyword search. But if somebody's asking like, how do I pay my bill? Now that is needing more text and needs to go into the unstructured data, do the searching using the index that we talked about and bring back the result. There's a difference between keyword and vector search, and sometimes some intents will need both. Like we might need to use a combination of the keyword search plus the vector search. That is what is hybrid search. For example, let's say it's a healthcare site and you wanted to find providers within 2 miles of this zip code and this specialty. So it needs to understand your context and also needs to go back to the data and bring the information using that keywords. So it needs a combination of both in that scenario. And you have to be aware of the Data Cloud credit consumption, how it all works out. This is a very complicated topic and I'm not the expert here. It's just a lot to learn. For beginning, at least, start to play around with Einstein data library, where you can ingest a data source and then play around with the retrievers and index and what it all looks like in the background. Then the best practices is always going to be start small, have a data strategy, right? Know what are the data sources you're going to use and establish the culture of data governance. A lot of companies probably don't even have that, right? Like you want to start establishing those best practices around making sure there's a clear data strategy and there's a data governance center before even going into this journey of AI. Because what's going to happen is if nobody is maintaining the data or nobody is archiving the old data and keeping it up to date, your agent is going to learn on that archived data, which is not going to be great when your customer is going to see that. And yeah, upskill for sure. Upskill your users, upskill your admins. It's all a learning. We're all learning together. So if you feel overwhelmed, know that we are all learning together. This is all brand new stuff for everyone. It's a blank slide, but I happened to attend a Tableau Next hands-on because I was very curious about the future of CRMA and where does Tableau fall into all that. Does that mean all the CRMA dashboard that we built is going to become extinct over the next few years? It's almost going to be a merge of Tableau and CRMA. And I saw a demo where the interface that was shared, that was called Tableau, Next, it looked very similar to CRMA, but with some additional capabilities. And the answer to my question about whether or not the CRMA is going to go away was it won't go away. So we still have a place for CRMA. However, there might be more tools in future to take that CRMA and convert that to Tableau Next. That is definitely going to be a long process. But for now, if you have a CRMA dashboard, you're fine. And when Tableau Next comes, there might be conversations around we keep it in CRMA, should we move it to Tableau Next, or do nothing. All right, that's all for today. Thank you so much for watching. I know that was me talking for a long time, and I cannot wait to get into the system and start tinkering with it now that we have access to Developer Edition. I'll be definitely sharing my learnings